Today we're talking about the value of the queen. That's this piece right here. Now it is very valuable in that it has a number of different options. If you get it in the middle of the board, there's going to be a ton of places you can go offensively. Now the queen, in addition to offense, is very valuable defensively. And if you notice, there's a lot of squares this queen can move to, but it's defending a lot of pieces. First off, it's defending this rook right here from the queen. It's also defending this knight right here. It's acting as one of the defenders for this pawn, though black can bring multiple attackers via the queen on h5 and the rook on c7. It is also defending this bishop right here, which is kind of important. Black can't recapture there, and it is defending, it acts as a second defender to this pawn as well. Should black choose to do anything, basically white has its queen in real good position and a number of different options. And on the offensive side, if you'll notice, we could put black's king in check by simply, safely by going to d4. So a lot of different options available. Let's take a look at some actual gameplay and see how we can actually implement this. In this example right here, we are playing as white, and we're looking at the value of the d1 queen as it's defending both rooks. Well, technically the f1 rook is the one we're focused on, as well as the bishop and pawn on c2. It is not defending knight on a4, which is kind of in trouble here. We're also kind of concerned about, more importantly, that f4 pawn, which will break down our entire structure here. So we need to come up with a solution to this problem here. Well, one of the things we have to do is put pressure on black's queen. So what do? We push the c pawn forward right there. And what that does is that allows our queen on d1 to protect the a4 knight. It also eliminates most of the squares that black's queen can retreat to. In fact, there's only one square it can go to. It's right there. Now our queen is going to keep on defense here by protecting. It protects the f1 rook. Now you can triangulate the rook around the queen. So it's defending a lot of pieces here, and there's only one queen, so we don't have to worry about getting set up on a mismatch here. So we bring the rook forward. It's also protected by the pawn, which forces black's queen to do the only move it can take right there, or it would be captured. And then we win the queen, and then we push forward with the queen with the idea of potentially pushing the rook, or we can just take that rook right there, and black decides to resign at that point. In this example here, we're playing as black, and we're going to use the queen to facilitate a mating pattern. We're going to start with the queen on defense. I'm looking at specifically the a1 rook. We want to get rid of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to capture the knight with the bishop there. White will probably recapture, which they ended up doing. They capture with a pawn there. Now we can bring the queen forward and take that pawn, but more importantly, it threatens the a1 rook. Now, of course, white moves it out of the way. It's now defended. So how do we break down this position further? Well, we want to put pressure on white. So we bring the rook forward there, forcing white to make a move. They decide to put me in check and exchange queens. I don't like exchanging the queen there, but it's not really another good option at this point. So we go ahead and we put him in check, forcing the knight to capture there, to which we move the rook over here to the side to a2. White decides to threaten. We bring the other rook in, and then we go ahead and we get both rooks lined up here, and then it's just a matter of a couple moves before it's a checkmate. But the queen acted as a big facilitator to getting that all in motion there. Here we're playing with the d1 queen as white on the Dr. Chess mobile phone app, and we want to use it for both offense and defense. So we're going to move it to C1 with the idea of defending that bishop on D2. And we're looking to break down Black's position here. Black decides to make a trade. We're not interested in that trade. We're interested in winning the game. So we go ahead and sacrifice our bishop there. Black captures. We bring our queen into position. Now we need to work our queen with one other piece. Here's an attack by Black. We capture there. Another attack. We don't want to give up this knight right here because this knight will work very valuable with a queen. So we bring the knight up to there. Now, of course, that's going to leave the check fork open, which means we're going to lose some material here. But we want to win the game. We don't want to recapture there. We want to win the game here. Now, if you'll notice, White's queen needs to get to H7. Unfortunately, there is a knight on F6 protecting that square. What do? Well, we happen to have a knight on C3. We can move it right there, offering the trade, or we'll take it outright. Black decides to check. We go over here. Black decides to capture. There's the check right there. And at that point, Black decides to resign as its mate in 1. The end of this game right here is another example of the value of a queen. Here we are playing as White. We have a number of options. We're obviously way down material, but there's a way to win this game. First move would obviously be check right there. So
check.
That's what we do. Black gets out of the way.
Check.
Another check. Okay, Black blocks.
Check.
Another check. Essentially, when you have a queen left or a queen with another piece, you're always looking for the best available option. You want to make sure there's no traps or anything like that. So in this spot right here, obviously E3 check is a good spot. Okay. Right here, is there any spot we can check them? Well, not really. So what do? We go to the next. Go to the next available setup. That would be F3. Okay, Black decides to bring its rook down. If you're in a spot like this, you probably want to have the rooks together, or at least the rooks protected. Obviously, if you look back here, this rook right here, the D4 rook is protected by the bishop. Yeah. So anyway,
check.
We're playing with the queen, so we've got our option right there. We're going to
check.
Keep putting them in check, and we're looking to get a check fork. That moves out of the way. Now we take this piece right here because there's no way to check them, as these two squares were covered by that F7 pawn. Now Black moves both of its rooks down, looking to, finish off this pawn right here and put White in check. The only problem is we have a free roaming queen, and all we need to do is get a check fork and
check.
That will end the game there.
Check.
So there's another check.
Check.
And of course another check. And again, what we're looking to do is try to get Black into a spot where we can check fork one of these two rooks right here. So Black moves there.
Check.
Another check. Black moves here. Perfect. Okay. Which square works great as a check fork? If you said G5,
check.
That is correct. And that's exactly where we go.
Check.
G5, check. Black moves out of the way. Now we won material, and we're at the advantage, and at this point, Black actually resigns. This game right here is a good example of how to use the queen for both offense and defense. We're going to first move the queen to B7 right there, with the idea of moving the F8 rook out, which we do right there. Now, if you'll notice, the queen is defending 3 pieces, plus on top of that, on the offensive side, it can potentially take the B2 pawn, which we'll be focusing on a little bit later. B2 pawn's kind of important. Actually, very important. We'll see in a minute here how white decides to push. A couple of options. One is we can recapture with the knight, but we don't want to do that. So we decide to capture with this pawn right here. White responds by finally taking. Okay, that's very good. That opens up the b2 pawn that we were referring to earlier. So we don't want to capture this with the queen. We want to use the queen as a defensive piece. Plus, we can activate that bishop on d7, which is pretty much only playing defense. So we've activated the bishop there by recapturing. White decides to take. And remember, that important pawn on b2 was unguarded, so we take it with the queen. But there's more important thing is now we have a threat on the knight. However, white's best option is to, to move their king out of the way. Their best option here is to move the king out of the way, to which we could respond with a number of, to which we could win the rook on e5, but they still have the queen because we could skewer it with the bishop on e7. We could move it to d6 and skewer the king there. However, white decides to move the knight out of the way, to which we can take that a8 rook and we skewer the queen. So white decides to capture there. We capture with our queen check. And now our queen is in a value, it's in a value position as it's checking white. And it's also, it's one of the attackers on that e5 rook, which we were referring to. But if we put a bishop, combine it with the bishop, we can get through. Because remember, the e5 rook is protected by that knight on f3 there. So white gets out of the way. We decide to capture here with the bishop, trying to close out, consolidate. Basically trade off pieces because we're way ahead material. And try to close out the position. Okay, we decide to put the bishop in place like I was referring to. So we'll have two attackers we can capture with the bishop, and then we can bring our queen in, to which white decides to resign at that point. This game right here is a great example of how to use the queen both offensively and defensively. Here I'm playing as white, and not the best opening here, in a little bit of trouble. Decided to play the queen to protect these three pawns, to which black responds. Now remember, this square that's black capture right here only technically has one defender because of the pen of the bishop. The pen of the bishop on b4. So a little bit of a problem here. So we're losing material. We're just going to take the knight. We're going to use the queen both offensively and defensively here, as the queen is defending a number of pieces, particularly the pawns, the knight, and some other pieces. So we're going to bring the knight out to
check
f3 to get the queen out of the way. Unfortunately, we left the f2 pawn uncovered.
Check.
Black has a pretty strong position here. Okay? So we move to d1 with our king. They can't threaten checkmate because we have that d2 square covered in multiple ways.
Check.
So they decide to go for a check this way. Capture with the pawn. Again, the queen is acting as a protector of the pawns. It was protecting checkmate. It's protecting a lot of pieces here. Okay. So the queen is acting as a protector. We bring the bishop out to threaten the queen. And remember, our queen, white's queen, on d3 is basically protecting those pieces, other pieces that we can move around it and attack black's position. Here, black decides to move to b2. Again, threatening to take the rook. But again, the queen we have in the center is protecting, can protect all these squares. So we move the rook to b1. Okay, queen wins material. So black's won a lot of material. We've got a concentrated center position, but we haven't really done anything yet. So now next thing is to develop. And what we want to do is just get our pieces. We want to protect this c3 pawn, so we bring an extra defender for that.
Check.
And then to which black responds with its only reasonable response, check. We just move our king out of the way. So we got a defensive wall mainly installed by the queen right there. Okay, black moves there. We got to go on the offensive. We're going to try to develop the bishop. Black moves its queen over here. And this is the fun part. Now we can go on the attack for black's queen because we have a queen defending all these pawns. We're going to push the d pawn forward there. And there's an exchange like that. To which black is going to respond by, well, they're actually going to respond by trying to trade off material here. But we have a very powerful piece in the queen. And we can do a lot more with our queen in terms of protecting other pieces. So we don't want to give that up. So the best option here is, you can hit pause if you'd like. Best option I decided to go with was queen to e3 because it does a number of things. It puts a pin on, black's knight can't go anywhere. It's pinned. So, I mean, that's good because that takes away a lot of moves that black has. So black's response, put the bishop to put pressure. Okay. We have a knight right here. Now, unfortunately, if we move our knight out of the way, black's queen can take this g2 pawn, right? But it's not a big problem because we have the queen protecting. If you'll notice, we have this bishop here on e2. Should black take with the queen, we can move this bishop from e2 to f3, which we'll see in just a second here. So I decided to play knight to d4. And black actually does take, threatening the rook, of course. But like I said, we have a bishop and we have a queen acting as a protector of the bishop. So we play the bishop right there, putting pressure on the queen. Where can black's queen go? Well, h3. Actually, that was the other option. They decided to trade off queens, which isn't so bad. But we can just recapture with the pawn right there. And we still have the pin in place on the knight, on that e7 knight. Now, black has to move its queen. Number of options. Black, I believe, chose h3. Yep, that's what they chose there. Okay. So we still got the pin in place. Now we get to go on offense. First objective is to move the king out of the way. Why am I moving the king out of the way? Well, I'd like to get another piece other than the queen pinning this king, particularly the h. I was debating between doing the h1 rook and the b1 rook right here. I decided to go, because of king's safety and the queen being on the right side of the board, I decided to go to the left side of the board. So again, black wants to trade off queens here. Don't like that idea. There's a number of options. Here with their queen, I decided to go for the g5, I believe. Yeah, it was g5 I went for. It threatens to take the f7 or g7 pawn right there. So black decides to finally move its knight out of the way. So its knight has some options. And this is great because now we have a huge opportunity here. If you'll notice, black has a queen in front of its king. And we just happen to have a rook right there on h1. If we move it to e1, now black's queen is pinned. It's going to lose some material here. Black decides to threaten the queen. But the problem is, if we put the king in check, they can't capture with the pawn. Black can't capture with the pawn. So, yeah, so all we have to do is just take the queen, king's in check, and then we can move our queen out of the way.
Check.
So we take the queen check. Black has to capture. Now we can move our queen out of the way. b5 looks really good.
Check.
So we check him right there. Okay. Obviously, black is going to block with the pawn right there. Well, most likely anyway. So we move our queen into position here. Not quite threatening checkmate because remember they have a knight protecting, which they move. Now we can add an extra. We can utilize one of our bishops here. I'm looking particularly at that d2 bishop. If we move it to b4, threatening checkmate, to which black decides to move the knight out of the way. The knight's protecting, now the knight in that square right there protects that e7 square, so we remove the knight right there, and
Checkmate.
that's the game right there. And of course, that is going to wrap this up. If one is looking for more tips on chess, we have 3 different playlists on this channel. The first playlist is Chess for Beginners. A lot of cool different tactics and strategies. This one's going to be in that playlist. Second playlist we have, and this helped me a ton, was the Pure Chess Challenges. That's Pure Chess for the PS4. You don't have to have the game to watch the videos because you can see the problems. I explain how to solve each one. There's about 99 different problems in there. In addition to that, we also have how to beat the master level AI in chess. Basically, it's against all these different chess engines, how to beat them. If I can figure out a way to beat them, it's on there. I got multiple games, some as white, some as black. But yeah, a lot of cool stuff on there. And of course, that is going to wrap this up. I am signing out. Thanks for watching and good luck.